After his death in 2018, R. Lee Ermey's house sat untouched for nearly 3 years. Located deep in Topanga Canyon, California, the home was tucked into the wild tangle of eucalyptus and live oak, a fortress of solitude built to Ermey's precise military tastes. The structure was rigid, solid, and plainspoken just like the man. A former Marine and famous for his role as Gunnery Sergeant Hartman in Full Metal Jacket, Ermey had retired to this secluded property to escape Hollywood's noise. But it seemed even in death, he hadn't entirely left. The house was purchased quietly in the fall of 2021 by a couple from Los Angeles, Daniel and Laura Mendez, both in their early 30s. Daniel was a former combat medic who now worked as a trauma counselor, and Laura was a freelance illustrator. They were drawn to the property not just because of its privacy, but because Daniel had long admired Ermey's dedication to veterans. It felt like a place that could offer peace. But almost immediately, things felt off. Daniel was the first to notice it. The sharp scent of cigarette smoke in the hallway, despite the fact that neither of them smoked. Then came the sounds, footsteps pacing in perfect rhythm late at night, a cadence too exact to be random. Daniel, who'd seen and heard enough in war zones, dismissed it at first. Old house, wind, pipes. But then Laura started hearing it too. The worst was the sound of a man shouting not words, just barking unintelligible commands like a drill instructor in a dream. It would always come from the basement, a space Ermey had converted into a private gym and armory during his final years. Laura tried to stay upstairs, keeping herself occupied with her work, but her sketches began to take a strange turn. Unconsciously, she began drawing military figures, men with blank faces in old fatigues, sometimes with their mouths wide open as if screaming. Her hands moved without thought, and sometimes, when she stepped back, she'd find the eyes in her sketches had appeared only after she finished. She swore she hadn't drawn them. There was a room in the basement Daniel had never been able to get open. The previous owner's agent claimed it had been locked when they bought the place, probably just storage. Maybe something sentimental from Ermey's widow, who had passed shortly after he did. Daniel let it be, until the night he heard the metallic clang of a locker door slam shut behind it. That wasn't plumbing. He forced it open. Inside, he found a near-perfect recreation of a Marine barracks bunk. Military blankets folded tight, boots lined precisely, and on the wall, photos of young men in uniform. Men from Vietnam, Iraq, and Desert Storm. Some looked recent. Too recent. There were also dozens of letters from soldiers and veterans Ermey had corresponded with during his life. But a few of the envelopes bore postmarks dated after his death. And one envelope was addressed to Daniel Mendez. But he hadn't lived here then. Daniel didn't believe in ghosts, but what he believed didn't matter. He began to dream vividly, always the same setting. A boot camp, a younger version of himself standing at attention, and Ermey walking between the rows of men, screaming into his face, repeating things Daniel had never told anyone, not even Laura. Memories from Iraq he had buried. Mistakes, regrets, losses. Laura, meanwhile, began to see Ermey in the windows. Not clearly, just the silhouette. Upright, watching, judging. And then came the knocks on the bedroom door at 3 a.m., always 3 raps. Always slow. But when they opened it, no one would be there, only the faint sound of marching fading into the walls. They brought in a local priest. Not to bless the house, just to talk. The priest stood in the living room for nearly 30 minutes without saying a word, staring toward the basement door. "He doesn't know he's dead," the priest whispered finally. "He thinks he's still preparing them, still training them. This was his final post. He never left." By late 2022, Daniel changed. He became stricter in his routines, cleaning the house in a near-military fashion. He shaved every day at 0600, even on weekends. He began to sleep on the couch by choice, saying the master bed was not earned yet. Laura begged him to talk, but he just nodded off like a soldier on duty. She finally left in April 2023, packed quietly and moved back to her sister's place in Los Feliz. She couldn't live in a place where her husband wasn't hers anymore. Daniel still lives there, alone. Sometimes hikers in Topanga report hearing shouts through the trees, commands barked from somewhere unseen. One ranger swears he heard a voice shout, "Eyes forward, recruit!" from the ridge above Ermey's old house. The house remains on no registry, and the address is unlisted. It's not for sale, because Daniel Mendez isn't leaving. Not until the gunnery sergeant dismisses him. Daniel started spending more time in the basement. He'd converted one of the back rooms into a kind of ritual space, though not one of candles or symbols, but of order and precision. The cot in the barracks room had become his bed. He folded the military-issue blanket each morning so tight you could bounce a quarter off of it. He no longer wore his civilian clothes, not even around the house. Always fatigues, boots laced tight, no exceptions. Dust no longer settled in the hallway. Somehow the air felt cleaner down there. Still, it was stifling. There was no air conditioning in the basement, but Daniel didn't sweat, even as July heat draped Topanga in a heavy, syrupy haze. The room stayed unnaturally still and cold. He didn't talk on the phone anymore, didn't check emails. Friends assumed he was in a depressive spiral. Laura had tried to call several times, in fact, but he never answered. When she came once, unannounced, she said she felt watched the entire time she was on the driveway. The windows were dark, but she had the overwhelming sensation that someone was glaring at her from just beyond the glass, measuring her, judging her posture, her breathing. She left without knocking. Inside, Daniel sat at the end of the cot, staring at the wall where Ermey's medals had been carefully framed and rehung. They had been packed away after the sale. But one by one, they began reappearing, starting with a purple heart Daniel knew had been donated to a museum. It was suddenly back in the center of the display, glass polished. The barracks room had changed too, slowly, without explanation. The lighting had softened to a dull green cast, like overhead fluorescence buzzing in an old military facility. And the room, it had grown. The back wall had somehow extended deeper than the original blueprint of the house. Daniel didn't remember removing the insulation or the wood paneling, but it had become concrete, cold, clean, and smelling faintly of oil and metal, like a bunker. One night in early August, Daniel awoke to the sound of boots hitting the ground, dozens of them, moving in rhythm. Not outside, inside the house. The cadence came from the hallway and drifted downward. He walked up the basement steps in darkness, barefoot, unarmed, unafraid. But when he reached the first floor, there was no one there. Instead, in the living room, were two straight rows of shadows, motionless, silent, human height. As Daniel approached, the shadows began to fill in with shape, then texture. They looked like men. Uniforms, helmets, eyes forward. Most had no faces, just smooth stretches of skin where features should have been. But one standing at the front was unmistakably Ermey. His uniform was pressed, his ribbons aligned, his jaw clenched tight, and then he opened his mouth. "Roll call." Daniel stood still. "Roll call." The voice boomed with such violence that picture frames in the hallway fell off the walls. Daniel snapped to attention without thinking. "Sir Mendez, Daniel J. Reporting for duty, sir." The figures behind Ermey remained frozen. "You missed a step. Reprimand incoming." A gust of cold air rushed past Daniel's face, like a slap. Then the figures disappeared, melted into the air, one by one, leaving behind only silence and the faint scent of gunpowder. From that moment forward, Daniel spoke to no one. Not out loud, not even to himself. Laura, still torn between guilt and fear, drove back to the house in mid-September. The driveway was overgrown. The garden they had planted together had been uprooted, and in its place were small wooden stakes, 12 in all, each marked with a number and a date. She recognized the dates. They were the days Daniel had lost friends in combat. Birthdays of the men who never came home. Laura's hands trembled as she stood there. No one had ever told her those dates. Not even Daniel. From the garage, she heard something playing loud and rhythmic. She followed the sound, each step heavier than the last, the music growing more distinct. It was a cassette tape, yes. A tape playing over an old boombox that neither of them had ever owned. The voice on the tape was Ermey's. Not acting, not a movie. A real recording. A motivational rant he had apparently sent to wounded veterans during their recovery. It was aggressive, cruel at times, but layered with something that resembled care. You don't get to check out just because you're hurt, goddamn it. You check out when your country says you can check out. Until then, boots on, chest out, and get the hell up. Laura turned to leave, but as she stepped onto the front porch, she saw something nailed to the door. A dog tag. It was Daniel's. Beneath it, carved into the wood, not written, but carved with something sharp, was a sentence. He's still in training. Topanga Canyon had always been a place of strange silence. Not the comforting quiet of the suburbs, but a living, breathing hush that hung over the hills like a veil. The canyon was known for attracting artists, mystics, outcasts, and occasionally, the broken. The Mendez house sat on a ledge that overlooked a slope of dry chaparral and old-growth trees, and behind it, the land rose into a hill so steep it cut off sunlight in the late afternoon. Locals referred to that hill as the Ridge, and some claimed you could see faces in the trees if the wind hit just right. Laura returned to the property a second time, 3 weeks after the dog tag incident. This time, she brought her brother Mark, older, practical, a former deputy in Ventura County. She hadn't told him everything, just that she was worried about Daniel and needed someone who could look at things with clear eyes. When they arrived, the front door was unlocked, but inside the house it smelled different. Not mold, not decay. It smelled sterile, like a hospital, or more precisely like a military clinic. Antiseptic, bleach, rubber gloves. The windows had all been blacked out with layers of duct tape and cardboard. The kitchen was stripped, no dishes, no food, no warmth. Just a spotless counter and a series of post-it notes arranged in a perfect grid. Each note bore a time. No words, just numbers. 5:30 wake, 6 o'clock shave, 6:30 drill, 7 o'clock silence, and so on. An entire wall of his life, broken into 24-hour rotations, repeated across 6 identical days. The 7th day, left blank. Mark turned to say something but stopped. His eyes had locked onto the hallway. "Do you see that?" Laura turned, and for the briefest second, she saw it too. A figure at the far end. Standing stiff, hands behind his back, dressed in full Marine uniform, his face in shadow. Then it was gone. Mark, having cleared rooms before, took the lead down into the basement. Laura followed, heart hammering, the stairs creaking beneath them. The air grew colder with each step, not in a natural way but as if they were descending into something designed to strip warmth from the body. The once modest barracks room Daniel had fashioned was now nearly double its size, the walls stripped to concrete and painted a shade of green-gray that hummed under the dim lighting. The cot was made, folded with obsessive care, and above it, the medals and letters were now displayed on a wooden board with such discipline that even Mark, not easily shaken, felt a strange tightness in his chest. The back wall was different, new. What used to be a shallow storage closet had been converted into a hallway, an extension that shouldn't have been architecturally possible. The blueprint of the house didn't support it. "I think we should leave," Laura whispered, but Mark stepped forward. "No, I want to see what's back here." The hallway was lined with lockers. Metal, rusted in places but numbered like a real barracks. The numbers weren't sequential. Each was a date: September 22nd, 04, November 3rd, 10, July 15th, 92. Dates of death? Battles? Laura couldn't be sure. One locker was ajar. Mark opened it. Inside, neatly folded, was a military uniform. And in the breast pocket, an old photo. Mark pulled it out. It was a group shot. 10 soldiers. Arms draped over each other. Dust on their faces. One of them was Daniel. But he looked younger. Much younger. Too young. And at the center of the group, in full command posture, was our Lee Ermey, his hand on Daniel's shoulder. "That's not possible," Mark muttered. He turned the photo over. On the back, written in sharp block letters, Platoon 313, Camp Echo. All present. All accounted for. But Camp Echo had been decommissioned before Daniel ever served. That night, Laura couldn't sleep. She had insisted on staying in a motel 10 miles down the canyon, away from the house, the woods, the dark. But even there, the dreams came. In them, she was standing on the ridge behind the house, staring down into the canyon. The wind was strong, snapping branches and stirring dry leaves. Behind her, boots marched in gravel. A man's voice whispered not in her ear, but through her, vibrating her bones. Still not ready. She woke in a sweat. Her phone showed a single notification. No number, no name, just a voicemail. She played it, static at first, then a whisper. He's shaping them. You shouldn't have interfered. She dropped the phone. Her breath was sharp, shallow. She looked around the motel room. The mirror above the sink was fogged, though the air was cool. She walked to it slowly. Written in the fog, clear as day, was a phrase. Class is still in session. Mark didn't sleep the night after they discovered the photograph in the locker. He sat in his truck just beyond the Mendez property line, headlights off, watching the house through binoculars. The forest behind the ridge was unnervingly still, almost unnaturally so, as if the land around the house itself had gone into a kind of mourning. No cicadas, no rustling leaves. Even the breeze seemed to hesitate as it passed. At 3:11 a.m., the front door opened. Daniel stepped out, or something that used to be Daniel. His posture was immaculate. His back perfectly straight, arms at his sides, chin lifted as if awaiting inspection. But his skin looked waxy pale. There was something lifeless in the movement, mechanical, rehearsed. He walked barefoot down the driveway, turned in perfect formation, and faced the ridge. One by one, others emerged from the shadows. Mark lowered the binoculars and stared. 10 figures, 12, then more. All men, all in uniform. Some wore modern camouflage. Others had gear dating back to Vietnam, Korea, even World War II. Their faces were slack. Not emotionless, just emptied. And Daniel stood among them, not as a man in charge, but as one enlisted. A soldier among soldiers. Then from the ridge something began to descend. A voice, not shouted, spoken, carved into the silence with such authority it felt like a memory being forcibly returned to every man who'd ever been broken by war. Attention! The platoon snapped upright in unison. You are not done. You do not break. You do not leave. You complete the mission. From the tree line stepped the shadow of a man. Tall, proud, chest full of medals. Lee Ermey, no longer fully human, but not a ghost either. Something between. His eyes gleamed with a feverish clarity, and in his left hand he held a clipboard. No pen. He didn't need one. The names were already known. You are all mine now. Mark started the truck and peeled off down the road, gravel spraying behind his tires. He didn't stop driving until he reached the sheriff's station in Agora Hills. When he tried to explain what he saw, they asked him how much he'd been drinking. He hadn't, but when he offered to take them back up, he couldn't bring himself to turn around. Weeks passed. No one heard from Daniel. Then one night, Laura received a package in the mail. No return address. Inside, a single cassette tape and a note that read, "His last debrief." The handwriting was Daniel's. She found a recorder in storage and played the tape. The sound was muffled, the quality rough, but Daniel's voice came through clear and calm, almost serene. They don't scream. Not anymore. They just wait. Some are dead. Some are worse. He's teaching us how to forget pain. How to push it so deep it becomes your foundation. Every time I break, he rebuilds me harder. Better. He doesn't want us to go to war. He wants us to stay ready forever. The tape ended with something chilling. Marching. A long procession of boots over dirt. Then a whisper, not Daniel's voice. Deep, stern, final. Dismissal denied. Today the house is empty. From the outside it appears abandoned. The mailbox overflows. Ivy grows unchecked across the roof. But neighbors still report flickers of light late at night. Rhythmic thuds echoing from deep underground. And once, on Veterans Day, a local hiker swore he heard taps being played from the woods behind the ridge, though no bugler was ever found. The new owners, if there are any, haven't introduced themselves. No real estate records have been updated. The county claims it's still owned by the Mendez family, but Laura has never returned. She's since changed her name and refuses to speak about her time there. When asked about her husband, she simply says, "He was reassigned." Some say the property has become a spiritual stronghold, less haunted, more occupied. Not by Ermey's ghost, but by his doctrine, his discipline, his undying need to forge men into warriors, no matter how long it takes, or what realm he must do it in. And if you pass by the place at night, they say you can hear it, soft beneath the rustle of trees. Stand straight, eyes front, mission's not over. And then the slow, synchronized beat of 30 boots hitting dirt. Again, and again, and again. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.